Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen who have joined us on this Dr. Fundi channel via multiple social media channels, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, and also via the Dr. Fundi website. Welcome to another interesting show that we're going to have today. Today, we are bringing in a discussion, a fresh discussion, around issues of communication. My guest today is Tegan Crymble, all right? She is the head of, what do you call it now? Head of, why do I miss it now? All right.
Behavioral insights.
She's head of behavioral insights at the Crymble Linguistics. It's a communications company or communication agency. All right. But we're gonna hear more from her about, this space of behavioral science, the space of behavioral linguistics, and how tapping into that space can actually make you to be a much more effective communicator, much more persuasive kind of communicator, results-driven type of communication. So Tegan, welcome to the Dr. Fundi channel.
Great, thank you so much for having me. It's exciting.
Right. Thank you very much. Now, I think just to ease you in, all right, just like when you go for interviews, for jobs and stuff, 2 minutes just to ease you in. So just to ease you in, just tell us a little bit about, Tegan, from a professional point of view, before we get to talk about the company Breadcrumbs.
Okay, so I mean, gosh, I am very interested in the health and wellness space. I sort of have always been, and that led me into doing my Master of Science degree, looking sort of at health and wellness in a very research-focused platform. And then I sort of joined the working world, and I worked for one of the big health insurers, which is founded on behavioral science principles. So I'm sure you can guess which health insurer that is.
I know, yes.
And I worked in the communications area, and later moving more into like a strategy product development space for physical activity, actually. So those of you that are out there running and jumping and going to gym.
Yes, and ending points in the process.
Exactly. And then, and then after sort of 6-7 years there, I left to join Breadcrumbs Linguistics. That's obviously where I am now.
All right. So there you are the head of behavioral insights. Now, just what does that mean?
So behavioral insights, gosh, I mean, it's such a fascinating space to be in at the moment, but it basically is looking at the behavioral science world and how we draw conclusions around how people behave and ultimately how people make decisions, because it's not as simple as we may think, but it's certainly very interesting.
Right. So maybe just to help us who are not necessarily very much clued up about the space of behavioral science, just what's behavioral science?
Behavioral
and
science.
How does it link up with communication and decision making?
Yes, absolutely. So behavioral science is a relatively new field of science, and it's become very topical lately, especially with the vaccine, and we'll get to the behavioral elements of COVID and the vaccine later on.
Yeah.
But basically, we make thousands of decisions every day. And from the moment we wake up to the moment we go to bed, we're almost bombarded with all these decisions. And in an increasingly noisy environment, everyone is sort of fighting for your attention. And so if at every point we had to stop and think about a decision, I mean, we would never make it out the door. And we certainly wouldn't be very effective humans.
Yeah.
And so what we all have is that we use what we call heuristics or shortcuts, rules
Yeah.
of thumb.
Yeah.
You know, you wake up, you get changed, you go and make maybe a cup of coffee. You almost go on maybe a bit of an autopilot how you make that cup of coffee
Yeah.
because you've done it before,
Yeah.
or your friend does it this way. And
Yeah.
so you're able to navigate the world. And I mean, that's a small decision, but there's
Yeah.
obviously much bigger decisions in a day. And
Mm.
you're able to navigate that because of these shortcuts that we use. So they're really effective.
Yeah.
And now what happens with these is that they can lead to cognitive biases. And so I don't
Yes.
want to sound too sort of
Mm.
sciencey here.
No, but that part I was coming to that was I mean, when I went through your website, you do talk about the cognitive
Mm,
bias, the unconscious cognitive bias. So
exactly.
you can
So,
get in. Yeah.
so what these cognitive biases are is they're basically our tendencies to behave in a particular way.
Yeah.
So if I can use a very practical example, let's use social proofing. We have a social proof bias, which
Yeah.
says we are more likely to do something if other people are doing it. And
Yeah.
that sounds quite intuitive. So you can sort of picture a practical example here. You're in a new city, maybe New
Yeah.
York when we're allowed to travel again, and you
Yeah.
walk past two restaurants, but you don't know these restaurants. One of them is completely empty and one of them has a line out the door.
Yeah.
Which one of them are you more likely to go to? And the answer is that you're probably going to go to the one that other people are at because they have given their stamp of approval.
Yeah.
Even though you'll have to wait in line and you'll get your food later and it's not very practical, social proofing will lead you to go to that one.
As we are talking, just some example that popped up in my head. We normally say, if you are looking for a job and or there's two candidates, they are equal in every respect. One is employed, the other one is unemployed. You're more likely to go to the one who is currently employed because same if you
Absolutely.
social scene,
Yeah.
somebody is looking for a partner.
Mm.
You find that the one who doesn't have a partner may think, why are people not taking a risk on him or her? And you're more likely to go to the other.
And you joke, but there's some actual research around that where they showed people pictures. So they would show you a picture in one scenario and they would say, this woman or man is single, rate
Yeah.
them on an attractiveness scale. And
Yeah.
then they would show the exact same picture and say, they're the opposite. They're now either single or taken, rate them on an attractiveness scale. And
Yeah.
those that were taken always came out as more attractive.
You see now.
Even though, so it's this social proofing. Other people think you're good enough to be in a relationship, and
Yeah.
so you're more attractive to me.
Yes. So you
So
were still continuing?
and I mean, there's one called the authority bias, and you would know this in your profession as a doctor.
Yeah.
People are much more likely to listen to you and to engage with you as a doctor than
Yeah.
perhaps if you were a teacher.
Yes.
This authority bias of like you look up to and respect people in certain positions.
According to that particular issue at the time.
Of course. So I'm more likely to take, well, I mean, it's sort of in general, actually. People look up to pilots, maybe the president, maybe the doctor, as just in these respectable positions. So it's a very interesting thing, these cognitive biases. So, I mean, I've given you two examples, but there are almost 188 of these.
Wow.
And it's not necessarily a cookie cutter example that you will behave in X, Y, Z, but it's very much we all have these tendencies, and these tendencies are subconscious but very strong within all of us.
All right, and then so enter behavioral linguistics, the language now. Your we'll call it your partner in business, Michelle. She's a behavioral linguist, right?
Yes, that's correct.
Right. So behavioral linguistics, just tell me about that.
So what Breadcrumbs does exactly, we're a behavioral linguistics firm, and what that means is we specialize in nudge-based communication. Mm-hmm. So we use a lot of these key behavioral principles when we craft any sort of communication, be it written or spoken or visual, with ultimately with the core belief that words are powerful because words nudge behavior. So, I mean, a very easy example in this space is scarcity. Let's take scarcity as a bias. We like things that are limited edition, that maybe there's only a few left or time is running out. So just sort of Black Friday as an example, we all probably spend a bit too much money on Black Friday based on the marketing of stuff. There's only 3 of these left, or when you're booking a hotel, 2 other people are looking at this reservation, book now. That language is invoking our behavioral bias there to try and get us to act in a certain way. So that's where the language element comes in, really leveraging those biases to get a desired outcome.
All right. Now, you guys talk about, I would call it behavioral, linguistic tips or nudges, about, that have to do with communication, maybe let's just talk communication first before we get there. I mean, that's a broad space, obviously. There's different types of communication. Just talk to me about that. The different types of communication, broadly.
So the different types of channels or how we apply nudge-based. So, I mean, the way we approach it is we work with a lot of private and public sector companies. And we try ultimately to craft simple, clear copy, whether that's an email campaign or SMS, whether that's an above-the-line marketing like a billboard or a radio script, anywhere that you are communicating with your staff or your members or just the general public, we try and make that communication as simple and clear as possible to ultimately make it easier for people to make decisions, and to make decisions that you want them to make. Of course.
That reminds me, some time ago, I think in 1994, there was a political party that was called KISS, KISS, keep it simple, stupid.
Exactly. And simplicity is sometimes overlooked. People sometimes think they need to use a lot of jargon or big words or be complicated to be important or to be respected, but it's actually the opposite. The simpler you can make your communication and the easier you can make it for someone to understand, the better, and the more likely you are to engage someone and get them to do what you want them to do.
Yes, and then there's something about using the present tense. As I was reading that, I was like, okay, I wasn't aware, people are more likely to do something if you're talking in the present tense. Just talk to me about that.
Absolutely. So this is actually a really big one. So the present tense is definitely the nudgiest tense. So we like to use the word nudge a lot. So it's the nudgiest tense for us. And the reason being is that one of these biases that we have, and a big one that plays out in the healthcare space, is called our present bias. So we are more concerned with the now than we are with the future. And I'm sure that makes sense to a lot of people. It's the reason we probably don't exercise enough right now, because we would prefer to maybe watch a movie. It's the reason we don't eat healthily enough. We want that pizza right now, or some of that KFC. Like, that's great. We don't save enough money, for retirement. That really affects us. We need enough money to retire. We don't save enough because we would rather go on that weekend away type thing. And so we have this sort of disconnect with the future. I'll start my diet on Monday. I'll do that tomorrow. I will plan that thing next week. We use this narrative a lot. And so it's important to try and bring stuff into the present for people. So go for a run now, not because in 10 years' time, it's going to help with your cardiovascular disease risk. No one cares. Go for a run now because you're going to get a boost of endorphins and you're going to feel immediately happier. That sort of shift in language and bringing it into the present is really effective for people.
Yes, because now you are talking about, we are about immediate gratification. So if I get those heavy hormones now, that's good, that to tell me about stuff that's going to happen in 5 or 10 years, you know, as a persuasive kind of message.
Yeah. And that's why we're quite geared towards incentives. I mean, go for that run and get your smoothie now. I mean, that's how a lot of these places are working, is that do something it'll benefit you in the long term, but we're also going to give you something real right now, whether that's a coffee or a smoothie or points. Like we're going to reward you now so that you do the behavior.
And this whole thing about immediate, you know, gratification, let me get something now. Is it something that is becoming more prevalent, you know, during this new millennium, or it has always been there, but because we always associate, you know, this thing of I want it and I want it now with, you know, with the younger guys, but has it always been there?
You know, it's definitely always been a tendency for ours. Whether it's been evoked as often as it is now, certainly not. We're definitely living in a world where, I mean, everything is instant. You know, you do something, you instantly post a picture, you instantly send that communication, you take your phone everywhere. And so everything is accessible and everything is instant. And so it just, it makes that tendency a lot more pronounced in us.
And the highlights they had, I'm just going through all of those nudges of yours, just to, you know, to give us a well-rounded, you know, understanding before we get to the deeper part that we wanted to talk about.
So highlighting the herd is what we sort of touched on earlier, that social proof bias. We're more likely to do something if other people are doing it. And when I say other people, it can be the general public, but even bringing it closer to home is more effective. So what are my friends doing? What's my family doing? What are my colleagues doing? It's very important what other people are doing, because then we think, well, that's the right behavior, I must do it too.
Yeah. So in a situation then, like now, we have a sizable, you know, percentage of people who are unsure whether they want to vaccinate or not. So by actually then showing that, you know, your friends, your family, other people that you look up to are doing it, you are likely then to actually adopt that.
Absolutely. And it's a very powerful one that we should leverage. We should show that the people in our circle and the general public are doing this. We should show that, like, influencers, people maybe in government, they're doing it, because then we think, okay, it's safe and it's the right behavior.
And about the nudge numbers, I didn't really think, I knew about the fact that, like, in my business, when we are doing quotations, you know, I always say to the guys, don't just put 0, 0, you know, it's like you just thumbsucked this, you know, when you're making a quote, you know, come up with numbers that, you know, will not appear as if you just thumbsucked this thing. So just talk to me about that, because you said writing a number in words is much more powerful than actually just writing it, you know, as numbers like 7 or 9 or 57.
Yeah. So this is a very cool one. So there's two things here. One, it's around the credibility of a number. So you spoke about a quote, but let's take a charity, for example. Let's say they go and raise X amount of meals. Now, usually when you get an email, they'll say, hey, thanks so much for your donation. We raised 100,000 meals. Now, if they really raise 100,000 on the nose, like, the chances of that are slim. But if they said, hey, thank you so much for your donation, we raised 172,300 meals. And then you're like, okay, that sounded like someone actually tallied that up and counted, and that sounds credible. So that can be a really powerful thing. You know, there's a time and place for these things, but if you're looking for credibility and accuracy, quoting the actual number is powerful. And now the second part of that is writing it out in numbers. So reading a number that's 100,000 is very easy. So we do it quickly. But now if you had to write out 100,000 Rand, it takes us longer to read that, right? And so because it takes us longer, our perception of it is that it's bigger. So you don't ever want to write out your quote for a business. That would be counterintuitive. But when you're wanting to show scale, it can help to write it out in words, because we just take longer to process it.
And the time is right?
Oh, so timing is such an interesting one. I mean, we know that we don't want to send people any sort of sales mailer on a Monday morning. We're all just trying to get through our mailboxes. Stuff has been piling up from the weekend. And there's some really cool research here, actually, which shows that they looked at parolees. I think it was some sort of American place. And so they said the judge would go in the morning, and the first couple of people, straight after the judge had had breakfast in the morning, they would more than likely be granted bail. The same applied for the people just after tea time and just after lunch. But the rest of the people that were towards the end of a session, when a judge was tired or hungry, they were less likely to get bail. And so that just like timing is so important to a decision. And so when you're looking to like, and so in a South African context, I think the last research posted by Everlytic was that Tuesday 11 a.m. was one of the best times to send a mail, followed by Thursday 11 a.m. But Friday afternoon, you don't want to get a mail Friday afternoon. You're not going to action that mail. You don't want to read it. So time is important.
Wow. Okay. And then rhyming. We all remember rhymes as we're growing up. So talk to me about this rhyming.
So rhyme as reason is such an amazing behavioral bias. I really love this one. And what it basically says is that if something rhymes, we're more likely to believe it. And the reason for that is just fascinating. The reason is that most of us grew up and our caregivers, so whether that was our parents, our grandparents, our teachers, the people that we looked up to and trusted, they often read us, song type, use song type lyrics or rhyme as reason. And so we sort of associated rhyming with credibility. And so when people use it, I mean, they've got to use it correctly, but we're more likely to trust something that rhymes, and we're more likely to remember it because of that bias in us.
Yes. Now, how much of this do the, what do you call it, the guys who do motivational talks, because I find that at times they make all of these rhymes and whatever, to try and get to us to be worked up to do whatever that they say you must do.
Yeah, so whether they know that they're leveraging these science principles, I'm not sure, but certainly they use a lot of compelling language and their narrative's spot on. And that's just either it's tried and tested, or maybe some of them are already doing some of this research. It's obviously all like publicly available, but it's engaging and it works.
Yeah, and the last one, picking the perfect pronoun.
So personal pronouns are really important, and it's very important for brands to use these. So we want people to feel involved. We want this element of community, and using pronouns like we and us and our makes us feel part of a story, right? We're involved in it. It's not like you're telling me something and I'm standing here on the outside just listening. You're including me in this journey. And as soon as we feel included, we're more likely to behave in the way you want us to.
Yeah. And there is an infographic in your website that looks at, it shows a cup of behavioral science and a dash of cognitive psychology, and some sprinkling of breadcrumbs, which is your company. The communication becomes a recipe for action. That got me thinking. You guys are certainly thinking very differently to other people that I've ever listened to in this space.
So we leveraged a bit of like the old Powerpuff Girls theme there. It's like a dash of this, a dash of that, and the Powerpuff Girls were born. But absolutely, we are lucky enough to be very niche and very specialized in language and linguistics, and so we're able to just spend a lot more time researching this and applying it, which potentially a lot of the big marketing firms, they don't really have the capacity for it. So it's a very exciting space.
So basically what you guys are telling us is that before that decision is made, it's very important to think through the messaging, the words that must be used, you know,
Absolutely.
so many other things around that message to give a better chance that the recipient of the message will most likely take the desired kind of action.
Exactly. So don't just throw words onto paper. Think about every word and how that is needs to nudge a behavior. And how do you do that in this context? And
Yeah.
obviously each context is very individual and specific, but really you should be thinking about making your copy as simple and clear as possible to nudge the right behavior.
All right. So now we have just finished about a year since we had our first case of COVID-19 in South Africa. The first case was on the 5th of March. Yesterday was a year since we had the hard lockdown. And a lot has changed in how we do things. A lot.
Absolutely.
So what has changed in the communication space in the past year?
So it's gotten a lot more noisy. I think because, I mean, it was noisy already, but because we've all gone online, there's just a lot, you're not really meeting around a table for anything anymore. You're not having status updates or project meetings in
Yeah.
person. They're all being taken online now.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot more that you're having to sift through and deal with. And so I think a lot of us are feeling fatigued.
Yeah.
Certainly decision fatigued. We're making a lot of decisions in the day and it's becoming a bit overwhelming.
Yeah.
And so that's even more reason to make sure that what you're saying to people is simple. You're making it easy to understand. You're making the action easy to do, to help them because we're all fatigued.
Yes, and you said something about we are actually lazy.
We're so lazy. And of course, as humans, we're lazy. We want the path of least resistance.
Yeah.
We
Okay.
want things to be easy, and
Yes.
we want them to be delivered to us at the right time, and we want them to be attractive in the sense that it's nice. It's a bright colored hand washing poster.
Yeah.
We want those things because that makes things easy for us, and we don't have to work too much.
All right. So, you guys at Breadcrumbs, you started noticing, pictures and the messaging around, vaccination locally and also globally, and you were not necessarily impressed with the pictures. People who have just taken jabs, they are grimacing, they look like they are going through pain, yet they were sharing those on social media to encourage people to do the same. And but also the messaging, to try and give information that should hopefully help people to decide to take up vaccine. So you were generally not so impressed. Just talk to us about that. Yes, you mentioned that you guys, at least you've got a background in the healthcare space, health and wellness, you specifically. Because I wanted to know that whether you guys have got any experience in the space. So you were looking at the messaging to try and convince people to vaccinate, and that messaging competing with a lot of disinformation and misinformation, especially in social media. Just talk to me about that.
Yeah. Okay. So the pandemic and the vaccine space is a really interesting one for people in the behavioral world at the moment. I'm sure we can all cast our minds back to our first family meeting with the president, where he actually said that behavioral elements and behavioral change is one of our key weapons to fight this virus. Like, we recognized very early on that it was our behavior that we needed to change, with physical distancing, mask wearing, hand washing.
Yeah.
And so we started doing a lot of research in this space. And as you and a lot of your followers know, vaccine hesitancy is a global trend. It's
Yes.
Why people are hesitant is perhaps nuanced to different regions, but this hesitancy is a global theme.
Yes.
And so we started looking at it and specifically ways to address it in a South African context when we have the vaccinations, readily available.
Yeah.
And so we initially approached it, of course, from a communication language perspective. So we looked at what the leading countries were doing. And I say leading in terms of those that have vaccinated the biggest percentages of their populations, Israel, UAE. What were they getting right? We started looking, how do we combat public perceptions and thoughts and feelings, which we know can be flawed from these, our tendencies, our cognitive biases. How do we combat those with facts and science and data? And so we embarked on this language piece of work, which was really interesting and really exciting for us, because it came up with things like, who is giving you this message to go and get the vaccine, for example? That the messenger plays a big role. Do you respect that person? Do you look up to that person? Do you trust that person? Or not? And that's a big one. We looked at what the message was. So is it just someone throwing words onto a piece of paper that's full of sciencey jargon, that's difficult to understand, that's maybe a little bit confusing? Or is someone, breaking it down and making things simple, telling you maybe a story, giving an example of someone else's experience? We know that's far more relatable for us. We looked at what are other people in your life doing? That comes back to that social proofing. And so we initially actually did quite a big piece on a communication guide on how to really talk to people in a way that's engaging and nudgy, and get them to understand this thing and make the right decision. And and the right decision here is to, of course, get vaccinated. And as part of that process, we did a lot of research around visual language, which sort of led us into this project. And people sometimes overlook visual language, but it can be really impactful. In fact, like, we process visual information faster and more efficiently than any other piece of information. So it's actually called the picture superiority effect. And so that's what led us into really critiquing the images that were being used by a lot of these media houses, and how we could contribute, in a very pro-social way to positive visual language. And that's sort of how we landed on this project that we did.
Yes, you guys call it the new project. So you were seeing those pictures, so I think even the president grimaced when he took his vaccine, and the minister as well, So I haven't seen someone who's smiling when they are taking the vaccine. Yet you guys actually looked at, a picture that's more likely to convince people should have certain things, or pictures should have certain things, around the use of color, representation, just talk to me around those things.
So I think let's start with what we saw and what we sort of took issue with, or saw it in quite a negative light. So I'm sure we're all familiar with the first COVID comms, where you saw that microscopic picture of the virus, the one that's all spiky, and it was probably dark red on like a black background. And those are scary images. Like, those are cautionary danger colors to us. And that's definitely not going to evoke any sort of optimism in anyone. So there was that image. Or I saw some with people in hazmat suits, which is simply terrifying. Can you imagine someone coming towards you in a hazmat suit? Like, you feel like the end is near. People grimacing, absolutely showing any sort of pain, looking away, squinting, like it's not evoking. And lots of people are scared of needles. It's a common fear for us. So focusing up on a needle or like a vial, it's not the imagery we want to see. And so we were like, okay, well, we want to apply the behavioral principles that we know work, and put out free, high-res stock imagery that anyone can use to nudge the right behavior. So absolutely, we had a little photo shoot, and we touched on a couple of key things. So one, I mentioned color psychology, really. Now, we all know certain colors represent certain emotions. So blue is a very calming color. Soft pastels, pinks and greens. Those are colors we can get behind, and that are very positive and optimistic. Stay away from black, dark orange, red. Those are like danger, traffic light signal colors. We don't want to use those in our visual language.
Yeah.
Then another one was, and very specific or very applicable to South Africa, is representative demographics.
Yeah.
And I'm sure a lot of people in the marketing world will know that when they were sort of crafting their comms and they went on to stock images or Getty
Yeah.
images and they typed in vaccination,
Yeah.
they might have gotten, a very African American looking person. That's not representative of our demographics. We're not looking at those people and saying, oh, that's someone like me. That's very obviously someone in like America or New York.
Yeah.
So how do we represent, our diverse rainbow nation and have people that you're like, okay, that person is like me? Because again, we want that social proofing. That person's like me, and so I'm likely to also want to do the same thing.
Yeah.
That was a key one for us. Then we looked at things like smiling. Now, I know smiling, we have to have our masks on almost always, but especially when we go get our vaccinations. And so you can't really see that we're smiling. So you'll see in some of our images, we printed smiles on them, or we wrote the word smile, or you can see when someone's smiling under a mask. It's a new term now called smizing. And that's a universal sign for happiness. Now, I know we're not all completely happy to get the actual jab or the prick of the needle, of course, but we're all happy to get back to normal, right? We're all happy to be safe, and we're all happy to get a bit of our freedom back. Absolutely. So it's representing that visually. Then we did, we used a lot of eyes. So eyes are, they're called the window to the soul for a reason. It's a very strong connection thing. But eyes are also an interesting visual play here in that it's called the watching eye effect. And if you think someone's watching you, you're more likely to do what you think the right behavior is, and you're more likely to be honest. And so there's some fun research here where they put just a picture. It's not even a person, it's just a picture of eyes in bathrooms, in public bathrooms, where people were supposed to wash their hands. And they found that with the eyes, people were more likely to wash their hands than without. So it's just this effect of like, you're showing eyes, and that's important, it's this connection element. What else did we do? We did, so we did two other things. We did a unity element. So you'll see we sometimes printed South African flags on the masks, but you could just as easily sort of have maybe some Protea flowers in the background, or a picture of the president framed behind you. That's again our unity, our community, our Ubuntu like feeling, like we're coming together. And there's been a lot of that especially in the president's speeches. We have our family meetings, and it's fellow South Africans, and we're in this together, and it creates this, we need to get to herd immunity to protect everyone. You're not only vaccinating for yourself, you're vaccinating for the next person, and for your family, and for your neighbor. So that union, that unity element, is very subtle, but it can be quite powerful as well. And then I think the last one was around I just spoke about hazmats being terrifying. You still want to communicate or visually communicate safety and professionalism. So obviously all our images, we used real nurses, of course, and they they have the face masks and the visors and the gloves and everything. So it's a safe environment, because of course we want to be able to trust and feel safe in the process. People are worried about side effects. You want that medical setting, as you'll very well know,
and professionalism that goes with it.
Absolutely.
So you guys, at your own cost, you have created these stock photos, right? Now, who are you intending to, or who are the people that you would want that they use these kind of photos?
Everyone, basically. So wherever we're talking about the vaccination, where it's relevant and where it's applicable, we want people to use these nudgy images. So we've already seen, we're so happy and proud that they're already being used quite widely in the media. A lot of healthcare, health insurers, I think Life Healthcare, Netcare, a lot of these places are already using them. Media agencies. So really, wherever they can be used to be of benefit, we want them to be used.
So for you guys, is it part of your corporate social, responsibility, CSI type of thing? I mean, it's costing you money, obviously, it
Yeah,
costed you money to get professional photographers and hire those
of
nursing
course,
modern
of
days.
course. But I mean, as we briefly chatted about, I think before the interview started, is that we really feel that, and I'm sure a lot of people feel the same, is again, it's this unity thing. We're
Yeah,
all in this together, and whatever we can do
yeah,
to add to getting to herd immunity, to add to
yeah,
the right behavior, to add to getting us all safe, the
yeah,
better. We all want to go back to normal. We all want South Africa to be South Africa again.
yeah,
We all do not want to go back into any of those high lockdown levels.
yeah,
And so, absolutely, it was just a pro social thing from us as breadcrumbs that what can we do to add our voice to this, to use
yeah,
our expertise in a very positive way.
yeah. But obviously, I'm sure the upside is there as well. I mean, as a business, you are there to make sure that you make a profit at the end of the day, or at least there must be some benefit to your business and any of your locals there, or yeah, something that shows that this
Yeah,
was
so absolutely, we definitely, since we are very niche, we're a very niche linguistics firm here. You know, we're very research based, and we have that behavioral science element. So wherever we can sort of educate people about behavioral science, make it topical, make it relevant,
yeah,
be seen as thought leaders in this space. Of course,
yeah,
that's beneficial to our brand.
yeah,
But certainly the leading motivation here is to give people accessible imagery that can
yes,
nudge behavior.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And how has the feedback been? I mean, those people who have already used your pictures, and people who have read about the article. Because I saw your story on one of the Times live articles that came out, I think, on Friday last week.
Mm.
What has been the feedback from people who read the article, or from people who've actually gone into your website to actually go through those pictures?
Yeah, so it's amazing because people have been really receptive to it and really happy to have access to this stuff. I think a lot of people sometimes overlook some of these elements in a com and maybe don't know the importance of visual language. And so being given, I mean, you'll see on our website, we've also got an article about the science behind it if anyone's interested in that. But being able to have access to these high res images for free, people are really excited about that. And the fact that it's backed by a lot of scientific research really helps the message in general.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Wow.
And
All right.
we were so happy that people have used it and it's being used by people that have a big reach, right? Because that's the point. It needs
Yes,
to reach people that are a little bit hesitant about should I, shouldn't I? They're on the
yes,
fence.
yes,
And so exactly. So if it reaches those people and it nudges them towards getting the vaccine, then objective achieved.
yes. I think on Wednesday this week, I was part of a webinar. I was one of the speakers in a webinar for one of the financial services companies, one of the top financial services company. And they did a survey in February looking at what percentage of their employees are already, at a point where they are ready to have the vaccine whenever it comes. What
Mhm.
percentage is unsure, and what percentage are completely opposed to that idea? And they had 38% of people who said we want the vaccine.
Mm.
44% they said we are unsure, and 18% they were like we want nothing to do with the vaccine. Obviously, as an employer, they can't force anybody, but
Mhm.
at least they can try to persuade them, because then they wanted to know what are the reasons behind why people don't want or are unsure whether they should take the vaccine or not. And I mean, the reasons were quite varied, from conspiracy theories, religious stuff, 666 and whatever,
Mhm.
to, this vaccine was produced very quickly. We don't trust it, to issues around the side effects, to say, we are scared of side effects,
Mhm.
So there were just a varied, a number of reasons. But the point was the opportunity for the organization was to give information, try and counter some of the misinformation or disinformation, with the hope that after this series of webinars, where people are actually getting to engage and have their questions answered, the majority of the staff of that particular organization can then choose to do the right thing, which is to vaccinate. But I'm sure it goes beyond just two doctors talking to them about trying to counter the misinformation or disinformation, and things like what you've just spoken about. The words we use, simplicity, and all of that. We hope that we manage to sway a few, but they need to do that. But there's the other thing about communication, that it needs to be repeated sometimes. Yeah, can you talk about that?
Absolutely. So what I was actually just about to say to that scenario is that, so you always have sort of those three buckets. And really, when you're trying to nudge behavior, you're sort of really only appealing to, we call them the movable middle. So
Yes.
those guys that are on that 44%, that's your target there. Those are the guys you want to move. Those 18% that are like, heck no, I'm not touching that thing. You're not likely to convince them with a or with the right visual language. You'll probably find that they don't like the flu vaccine, and they don't, they're probably anti-vaxxers maybe in general.
Yes.
And so that goes to a much deeper space for them, compared to the guys that are just like, oh, well, I heard it's going to have a tracking device in it, because you can quickly talk to them in a very simple, relatable way to say, oh, I can understand why you would think that because of X, Y, Z, but actually it's not the case. And this is why.
Yeah.
And you can use the right messenger. So maybe it's a friend of theirs who's giving the message, and you can do it very simply, and you can say other people are getting it done. You can tell a story. So there's a way to do it, and absolutely, it's not a one touch point. You're usually not going to change someone's mind that quickly. We're all a little bit stubborn and set in our ways.
Yeah.
And so I think that's also where the education part of our project comes, where we put the principles and the science behind the imagery, because that allows other people to apply it. And so if you're seeing the imagery and you're seeing a certain type of compelling repeatedly, you're more likely to start thinking, oh, okay, well, that company thinks it's like this, and so does that company, and so does that company, and so maybe there's something in this, and maybe I should rethink my stance. So it really is, it's a journey, and it's to get everyone to start trying to communicate in a more effective way.
Yeah. All right. No. Yeah. Well, have you guys tried to engage with, let's say, different levels of government? Because they are the ones who have a responsibility to communicate the messaging from government, instead of leaving the space or creating the vacuum which is filled in social media by so many other people. Has anybody shown any interest in some of the stuff that you guys have already done, the imaging that you've used?
Yeah, so we at the beginning of the pandemic, we actually did a little bit of work with Netcare and the Department of Health in sort of, I'm sure you guys know, around that tracking tracing app. And how to make those messages effective. So absolutely. They're a little bit busy at the moment trying to get our vaccinations to us. But they do use a lot of the right marketing concepts. So I think they've got an agency there that's using the right behavioral science approaches. Because you'll see a lot of the wording in that track and trace, and in some of their social media posts. They're starting to use the right language. Absolutely.
Beautiful. So what's next for you guys in this space? So
I think the next step is, and we're doing a little bit of research work for a company that's doing some work with the mass vaccination sites. So what's the next step now when you get into when it's your time, when you're ready for your vaccination and it's ready for you, and you go to a site? How do you use some of the behavioral science approaches and behavioral linguistics to really get people through that process efficiently and make it a good experience for them, because they're then going to tell other people, hey, that was painless, that was easy, that was super, and you're more likely to encourage more people. So so I think the next step is a bit of work now on actually getting people vaccinated, which is very exciting.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. All right. So I think at this point, I need to then thank you for your time. I mean, a Saturday afternoon is normally family time, private time. So for you to give us almost an hour of your private time to just talk to us about, your area of expertise, we really welcome that. And so thank you to you. Thank you to the people in your organization. And thank you for being patriotic, doing stuff, not because you want anything out of it, just to contribute to making sure that more South Africans choose to vaccinate when the time comes. So thank you very much for your time. And I also want to thank our viewers who have logged in. I hope that they have been educated like I have been. This last 45 minutes has been a nice learning curve for me. And thank you very much. I'm sure it's not the last time we chat, but thank you very much and well done. Keep doing the good work.
Great, awesome. And just for those that want to access the images, you can they're on the landing page of our website. So you just go to www.thebreadcrumbs.co.za. So they're there and you can download them for free.
But just there, the breadcrumbs, this breadcrumb, as you guys were coming up with the name of the business, why breadcrumbs?
It's a Hansel and Gretel type approach. We're trying to you leave crumbs so that people follow you to a certain place. So that's exactly it. We use communication to lead you to a desired action. So that's breadcrumbs.
All right, now that makes sense to me. But thank you very much, Tegan, and enjoy the rest of your weekend.
Awesome. Thanks so much for having me. It was great chatting.
All right, lovely. Thank you. And thank you to everybody. All right.